as COVID-19 began to be manageable, then we had Memorial Weekend and George Floyd. And this weekend, I liken it to 1963. You know, before 1963, America knew about segregation, but frankly never thought it was that bad. Politicians were playing games. The White House was preoccupied. But in Birmingham, when those TV cameras showed up and showed dogs and police hoses aimed at women and children, that's when America woke up. And following that TV depiction of the abuse at the hands of law enforcement, we had legislation passed, 64 Civil Rights Act, 65 Voting Rights Act. And I suspect that the George Floyd video awakened white people to the reality that this is not our imagination. When a black man with a doctorate degree driving a Mercedes-Benz with good credit sees the red lights flashing in his rearview mirror, and his stomach begins to churn and his heart begins to beat, and his white friends say, well, if you haven't done anything wrong, you know, there's nothing to worry about. I think the George Floyd video has now proven to white people that there is something to the cries that we have had all of these years, and it is not in our imagination. And you've seen white people respond physically, young white people. You've seen older white people respond in writing and make statements. And here's my concern, and Professor, you help me with this. Here's my real concern, Karen. You know, after the 60s, when the country acknowledged that we needed legislation to ameliorate, you know, the conditions of black people, while we were needing to recover from all of these hundreds of years of oppression, there was the bait and switch happened. So the conditions, the historic conditions of black people turned into affirmative action, turned into diversity and inclusion, turned into small minority-owned businesses, so that now, 50 years later, we find women and LGBT and Latinos and everybody having benefited from the struggles of black people. And what I'm concerned about now is that the historic systemic racism that is being acknowledged not turned into programs to help everybody but us, because that's been the history. In fact, I hear our people talk about black and brown. No, black and brown dilutes the issue. Black and brown assumes that brown has suffered equal to blacks. And I'm very concerned about that because, you know, this thing gets watered down into diversity and inclusion, you know, because just the word black, it's hard for people to say 3 times in a row. So Mitt Romney said Black Lives Matter. That's time number 1. Let's see if he can say it 3 more times in a row and focus on black people.
You said something really powerful, and I was going to ask you a host of other questions, but I want to stay right here for a second because I think spiritually, which you'll relate to, we tend to naturally want to include people because that's who we are. We're inclusive people. We don't have a problem bringing folk in and feeding them and having them, you know, we share. We're going to dance with the police that just brutalized us, and we're happy if they take a knee with us. We're going to forgive them. We're going to take ourselves off of a bench and hug a person that just killed somebody, Botham Jean, I'm talking about, Amber Geiger. You know, we're naturally that way. But what you're saying, I think, is super important messaging-wise. It's like not calling it police defunding, but calling it budget justice.
Budget justice.
Black, you know, affirmative action has to be for black people.
Right. In the early 1970s, right after the Civil Rights era, the big struggle for us was affirmative action. And affirmative action, the compromise to resolve affirmative action was to make it anti-black or neutral to black people. And I'm telling you, Listen, 72% of the white families in this country own their own homes. That means every month when they make a payment, they are creating wealth. 46% of the black people, the black families, own homes because there is no targeted initiative to focus on home ownership among black people. And I'm not against anybody, but, you know, I grew up with that old adage that says charity begins at home, and the Bible even talks about being good to everybody, but especially those in the household of faith, and the people pay my salary are black. So, yes, I'm for human rights. I'm for all rights, but I work for black people, and I am a black person, and I'm tired of my whole life has been spent working for black people, but watching other people qualify for the benefits that were created by our problem.
And our fight. And our fight.
And our struggle.
You know, this is why white women are the primary beneficiaries of affirmative action programs. And we still have black students at colleges, for example, where you might max out at 2-3% of the student population, and that's thank you, affirmative action. This is why when we talk about the primary beneficiaries of some of the policies that Dr. Soares is mentioning, the primary beneficiaries of policies that were designed to ameliorate the issues black people are suffering from are not targeted at black communities. And I think that one of the things that we should take, one of the lessons we should take from all of the efforts and the work that our elders and folks throughout those movements had accomplished was we have to be unapologetic about naming blackness. We have to be unapologetic about being explicitly black and recognize that it is okay to also be exclusively black. Now, when it comes to the black and brown, I think a lot of people use that phrase to incorporate the fact that there are also black people who are not necessarily African American. So if you are Jamaican, if you are Dominican, if you are Haitian, when you come here, you are also dealing with the negative impact of racism. But brown now also includes our Asian brothers and sisters. Brown includes Latinos, whether or not the Latino is black or white. We forget you can have white Latinos, you got black Latinos, you got mixed Latinos, you got everything in between the same way we do here. And so I think that black people, we have to become more comfortable in naming blackness and in advocating explicitly for blackness. Like when I have law students who come to the Center for Law and Social Justice, I tell them, if you are a law student who is of color and you are successful, largely your success has been academically because you were able to avoid issues of race. That is not a skill set that is going to serve you here because the Center for Law and Social Justice is explicitly designed to meet the needs of New Yorkers of African descent. So I need you to build up that racial justice muscle structure because it has atrophied, because part of your success has been avoiding issues of race. We have to be able to name, to develop a frame of reference and a frame of analysis so that we are not just saying Black Lives Matter. We have a racial justice analysis for every single policy. So you can't just pass affirmative action. You got to pass affirmative action for black people because black people suffer from harms that other people do not suffer. And we have to be comfortable with that because a lot of us who grew up in these integrated spaces have spent years squelching, ignoring, avoiding, evading, having to be too race. Oh, I don't want to talk about race. That's Larie's thing. She does that. I just want to talk about, all people or diversity issues. That's not going to serve us anymore. And we are finally at the point, what you and Drew were talking about yesterday. You better go for the gusto. If your boss is asking you, well, what can we do? You better name some serious. Don't be pinching around the edges. Go for it. Shoot for 100. You might end up with 80. We have to name blackness. We have to be comfortable being explicitly and be okay with being exclusively black.
I love her. Yeah. I love her. She sounds like old school. You sound like the 60s. Yeah. But, no, it's true.
I was raised right, sir. True. I was raised right.
Yes, she was. So Karen, let me ask you this.
That's it. What she just said, we should make a clip of that and just let it, what do you call that?
Don't worry. There'll be a clip.
Over and over and over again.
There'll be a clip of it. Don't you worry about it, Dr. Soares. So let me ask you this. You sit on some boards, and I'm getting a lot of folk reaching out right now. Companies now are realizing, we need some diversity. We need some diversity on our boards. What Larie is saying is that there are a lot of black people who have risen to those positions not being black, not making white people uncomfortable. Now, when white people look for diversity, they're going to pick those people to come and sit on their boards, or those people to come tell them about what they need for diversity when they don't even know because they have spent their careers avoiding blackness? How do we get them to pick the right black people to make real change in these companies? Because I know you do it when you're there.
I don't know, to be frank with you. I don't know. What I do know is that the more we form our own companies, the less we need to be on their boards. And I just think that we have to do our own, I don't know. How do you convince a group of white people to pick a black person that makes them uncomfortable? It kind of begs the question.
But that's what they need.
Let me tell you what happens to me. What happens to me is my resume fools them because they see I went to Princeton. They know I've been Secretary of State. They know I've been on bank boards. They know I've written books. So their image of a Negro who does those things is not me. And then when I show up, it's too late. Plus, I got a name. My name ain't Jackson or Brown. My name is Sori. So when they look at me on paper, they see one person. Then when I show up, I speak standard English and I can organize thoughts and I have solutions to problems. So it tricks them until they ask the question or they say something stupid or they propose something that I had that experience a couple hours ago in a board meeting. And then I speak up and then they're just quiet, they're just silence, and then I have to break the silence that I created. But I think we should do two things. One, I think we should train our people. This young lady, as sharp as you are, I can teach you how to slip in some places before they really know who you are.
Yeah.
See? That's a part of it. Because there's a part of you that white people need and like, and you don't have to give your whole speech day one. So we have to train her. But only people like her that we can trust that when they get inside, they don't forget how they got there. And then the second thing we have to do is we have to create more of our own. I was thinking this morning, I was thinking about, Karen, you, because I'm on your show today, putting out something saying, I need 10 black people to put up $50,000 this month. So I have $500,000, and then we can leverage that to do a $2 million investment, right? And I think the only reason I don't do that is because I don't want to get my feelings hurt by the other 9 people who don't show up. But before we change the whole country, we can do it in small pieces at a time, and create our own institutions like we did after slavery. We didn't beg Harvard to let us in. We created our own and built our own. And the same thing with, I have a good relationship with Prudential, but from time to time I have to remind them that there was a time they would not sell black people insurance. And so we formed North Carolina Mutual and Atlanta Life, So I think this should be a reminder that after all these years and all this struggle, we are still going to be our own best solution.
That's right.
I love that message. You're optimistic. You're an optimistic person. You're a man of faith. Dr. Stories, who you can listen to on Urban View, channel 126. He kicks off the Sunday lineup For Your Soul, where you get to see his pastoring, because that's quite an experience. He's one of the most amazing pastors that I've ever heard. You're optimistic about where we're going. I've said before that this is the opportunity. This is that moment. This is that Emmett Till moment. This is that moment like the 1960s that you brought up. Are there tangible things that you think we can act, in addition to doing our own thing, that we can get done over the next, I think we have a short window. I think we have maybe a couple of months, maybe till November, some things that we can absolutely get done.
Yes. First of all, I do believe that this police reform that was documented by the Kerner Commission in 1968, the police reform can get done. Yes, I believe that. When we dismantled the police department in Camden, New Jersey, black woman was mayor, Dana was mayor, and those of us that supported her from various positions supported her. I sent my director of security to Camden to be with her during that season. He's a retired major in the state police. We made him the first black major, and so we just came together as black people to support a black woman who was mayor. And
break that down for a second. Break that down for a second, because I think it's important for us to understand the anatomy. So Dana Red was elected mayor of Camden, right? So the people had to vote for her. So y'all got to vote, right? So they showed up. They elected this black woman as mayor. At the time, Camden had one of the worst crime stats in all of New Jersey. It was one of the most dangerous places. And I know that because when you say Camden or Trenton, people are like, oh, she got elected. What happened next?
Yeah, crime and poverty. Well, what happens is police departments culturally use our own crime to justify their brutality, you see? So the police department in Camden said, look, we'll clean it up by our means. And so what she decided was that the police department's corruption and culture of brutality exacerbated the crime problem, and it does. So the issue was, how do we reform the police? Now listen to this, because all of us are pro-labor, because the labor movement helped the civil rights movement. The labor movement, gives us benefits. But let me tell you something. There are places where organized labor has become organized crime, and police departments in large measure have as a key barrier to reform police unions. It's the police union that applauded those cops in Buffalo when they came out of arraignment. It's the police unions that raised money to defend cops that kill black people. So all unions are not equal. So the police union would not even discuss reform with this black woman who was mayor. She said, fine, you don't want to discuss reform, because to reform a police department necessarily means making amendments to their contract. Because their contracts have language of protection that give them the arrogance that they have. So she said, fine, I'll tell you what, you don't want to negotiate your contract. The contract is for a job. And so what we'll do is just eliminate the jobs. And she just shut down the police department. She got death threats. She couldn't have a backyard party at her house. And those of us who had been in I had been in government, so I understand the dynamics. I sent my personal security to her to work with her during this, because she was afraid of the police. And others around the state used their resources to help her through the process. And what we did was help her and support her morally, physically, spiritually, and otherwise. She dismantled the police department. She reconstructed a new police department and rehired. We always talk about the bad apples. She rehired the good apples and let the bad apples stay away. Now we have in Camden a model where you didn't just defund the police, we dismantled the police. She hired the same chief. It was a good chief. Now they spend less money on police. They have more police and less crime.
Wow.
And now Camden is a model that a lot of other jurisdictions look to for what effective police reform looks like. It's a model across the country that people literally to this day look at. So when some people saw those videos of the officers who were dancing with the folks, that was happening in places. I think Newark had that, where the police were refusing to engage in militaristic tactics. Those are in places where that level of reform has already begun. And Camden is now a model that many other jurisdictions that are looking to do this can hold up as something that says this is possible. And one of the things, Dr. Soares, you said that was so many things you said were so salient for me. But the first was that when she did this, recognizing that her life could be in danger. So she had the inside work of actually restructuring what those jobs look like. But then you, from the outside, had to recognize there's some gaps in this strategy we're going to have to help fill, so I'm going to send in my security. So we have to recognize that when you're trying to change the belly of the beast, you can't just have an inside strategy alone. You also have to at times incorporate that outside strategy that's going to help ensure the safety and the sanctity of the people who are involved in doing the work. That pressure, like Karen, when you talked about who are those companies going to hire when they're used to having, quote, good Negroes in the board who are able to climb that mountain and climb that corporate ladder because they do just the right thing and say just the right way, and they take all the bass out of their voice, and so they're not threatening at all. You don't want those people structuring whatever the diversity plans would be. It would be wonderful if we had, I think Dr. Randall Robinson in his book, The Debt, he talked about that 10-point plan to evaluate elected officials. We need a rubric, an independent rubric. Teachers use it, professors use it all the time, to determine what would a good policy for this type of industry look like? What would a good response to these types of incidences look like? So we have a checklist of things we can go down. If you make 3 out of the 5, not so great. 4 out of 5, we're willing to rock with you. 2 out of 5, no, sir. You must go back and you must restructure this in a way that's going to center blackness. Again, explicitly censoring blackness. And so we need to not have policies based on personality. We need to have policies, whether they're reform or diversity or whatever, or pro-black policies that are going to be based on identifying the need, creating a policy that centers that need for those people. We do not need white women to be the predominant beneficiaries of affirmative action. We need black people to be I'm not mad at white women benefiting, but the fact that you are the primary beneficiaries is problematic when affirmative action was created to ameliorate the harm of slavery remanifesting itself in Jim Crow.
Yeah.
Fact.
So when I wrote my article in response to the protest, my first recommendation with Camden in mind was find a place where it's working. Go there. Find out how they did what they did, extract the principles, and replicate it. And that's going to happen. It's begun to happen already. So in the area of police reform, that is going to happen. That camera, that 17-year-old who took that video, she should get the NAACP Image Award.
Yes.
She ought to get the Congressional Black Caucus Award. Every award available. But she is the pivotal personality that contributed to this movement. However, to the professor's point, while police reform is going to happen, every industry, the entertainment industry, the healthcare industry, the technology industry, has got to have its own George Floyd moment, either induced or produced, because as police reform is going to happen, you can reform all the police in America. And they could come to your house and wash your feet. But if you're still broke, if there's still a technology gap, right. If the displaced workers don't have the skills to fill the unoccupied jobs, we are still in a mess. Listen, I would almost rather have mean cops and money than have nice cops and be broke.
I'm thinking about
that. We need
an
economic strategy.
And what do you suggest?
Strategy.
What does that look like, Dr. Soares? What does that look like?
It looks like it looks like there are 2 levels of economic progress. One has to do with jobs. There are 1 million nursing positions in America that are vacant. 1 million. We have a nursing shortage. That's before COVID-19. What it looks like is identifying 100,000 black girls who are 16 years old and putting them into a trajectory to become nurses in 7 years. So y'all going to be nurses. And telling the healthcare community, we got 100,000 black females, and we want jobs for them. It's a pipeline. We've got, we'll have 3 million vacant technology jobs by the time COVID-19 goes down. We got all this expansion of virtual capacity. We've got artificial intelligence. We've got virtual reality. We've got robotics. And we got all these black geniuses in jail and on the corner. So so in the terms of jobs, we have unskilled labor ready to be trained, and they're not going to be trained in a 4-year curriculum at a liberal arts college simply studying somebody else's history. We're talking about specific specialized training like they did in India. India and China, when I was coming up, if somebody gave you a gift and it said made in China, you were insulted. It was cheap. It was fragile. It didn't work long if it worked at all. Now, if something's not made in China or India, you wonder if there's something wrong with it. So we have the capacity. Then there's entrepreneurship in business. What I want, if Jamie Dimon, Chairman, CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, he said Black Lives Matter. Good. If Black Lives Matter, not only do I want executive positions at J.P. Morgan Chase, more importantly, I want a contract to provide you with goods and services. My governor, right here in New Jersey, my governor said Black Lives Matter. 0.01% of the $32 billion spent by the state of New Jersey is spent with black businesses. All black people in jail, and no black people has a contract to even sell the prison system toilet paper. You know, if you want to start a business and the Department of Corrections gave you a contract just to sell toilet paper, you'd be a millionaire. You'd leave a legacy for your children. And when your grandchildren ask your children, what grandma do? Say, man, she was selling toilet paper. You know how much toilet paper the prisons use?
And there are black toilet paper and paper towel companies out there. So we just need to connect those dots. This is the beginning. Dr. Suris, I want to have you on more frequently. I know you're like, why am I on today? Because we need you.
No, I'm on because you want me on, and I do what you tell me to do.
No, that's not why. You are feeding people on Sunday, and I want you to feed them during the week as well, because it's important that we mine this knowledge. You are a mine of wealth, of knowledge that we need to extract so that people can get their lives together and have the blueprint for what to do next.
All right, so can I tell you a secret?
Okay.
We have attorney-client privilege, right?
Okay, yes. Larry, you're overseeing it.
So let me tell you.
I bless this moment.
So, Professor, she gave me an hour on Sunday, right? 1 hour. And basically it's to preach. So what I've started doing, I preach slightly shorter sermons. That way I can fill the other time with commentary to talk about this kind of stuff. That's just a little secret.
It's not a secret. I listen to
love it.
This is the plan, because listen, God is in everything. I don't make the distinction. I don't separate. But let me thank you for being here. I love you more.
Thank you.
Yes.